This is By the Numbers, a podcast brought to you by the University of South Alabama's Mitchell College of Business. Welcome to By the Numbers. This is Dionne Castor. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here at Mitchell College of Business. And today we have Dr. Don Mosley, who is a professor of management courses here at Mitchell College of Business. And as always, with me is Shane Monagle. He'll be helping me conduct this interview. So welcome, Dr. Mosley.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm very excited.
Okay, well, welcome.
And thank you, Dionne. Yeah, as she said, thank you, Don, for coming here. This is By the Numbers podcast, hosted by me, Shane, and again today,
Dionne.
Exactly, yeah.
Because Brylan is out. He's a track meet.
Brylan's a busy guy, so can't be here today. But we're going to get started into it straight away. Could you share a little bit about your early life and education, and your educational background, and kind of what experiences influenced you and shaped your journey today?
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Something light to start.
Well, so a connection to South. When I was about 8 years old, my dad interviewed for the dean's position here. He was recruited to come down and be in the applicant pool, and ultimately decided that Mobile was, had a lot of opportunity, and he was excited because the business school at the time had a lot of growth potential. It was a young school, young university, and so we moved down here in 1973, and he became the second dean of the Mitchell College of Business. It was not named at the time.
Right. Mm-hmm. Came from where? Where did you guys come from?
So Dad had been, at the time, he was the chair of the management department at Mississippi State University.
Okay.
And we had, I guess 2 years earlier, or 3 years earlier, he had been invited down to the University of Otago in Dunedin, New Zealand, to help start their MBA program down there. And so we lived for a year in New Zealand.
New Zealand, wow. How neat.
So he was a real adventurer, and my mom enjoyed that, but I'm not sure she was ready to move to Mobile so soon after getting resettled back in Starkville,
Right.
But it was a good move. He did a lot for the college in the early days, and he had a really great team. Like Lynn Robinson, she and her family kind of took us under their wing for sure. And then some early hires that he made are currently Professor Emeritus here in the college. Ed Harrison, who passed away unfortunately. Carl Moore was already here. He was one of the members of the college that was here.
He's also a former dean, right?
Yes, mm-hmm. he was a dean, not right after Dad, but there was one in between, and then Carl was a longtime dean of the college. And then Paul Petrie was actually Dad's first doctoral student, or in his first doctoral student class at Mississippi State, and he recruited him here to join the faculty. So there was really an exciting a team of management folks in the college at that time. Lynn was in marketing, and there's some others that I remember that were really instrumental in helping the college grow and achieve AACSB certification, and develop one of the strongest supervisory training programs really in the country. The number that they were running through that program at that time the numbers were pretty amazing. So that's my earliest connection to the college.
Mm-hmm.
So you remember being around here, 8 years old, watching the college be built up by your father?
Yes, Shane. In fact, where Shelby Hall is now, that was just woods with bike trails. And so we would ride our bikes through the trails, and on snow days, which happens very infrequently in Mobile.
I can imagine.
We would pick a hill on the college on the campus here to sled down, on cardboard boxes, and so it was a lot of fun growing up just a few miles.
You can't do that now. You get hit by a car.
That's right. A lot of changes. Jag-tran, right? Jag-tran. So I would say that my dad was a real big influence on my life. Well, both my parents, but from a professional standpoint, my dad.
How long was he dean?
So he was dean 73 to, it was either, I think it was 84, Dionne.
Yeah, wow.
And then he stepped down and returned back to faculty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And how did this lead to you then pursuing a BA in philosophy first, as opposed to business?
That's a good question. I went to, so I took a gap year between high school and college. I kind of needed that, I think, to figure my path out. And I decided when I came back from working in the Caribbean for a while that I wanted to go to Millsaps. So my grandfather on my dad's side went to Millsaps and played football, and then World War I broke out, so he joined the Army, and then after the war he returned and he finished up at Mississippi State.
Oh, yeah.
But my mother had gone to Millsaps and graduated, and
Where is Millsap?
it's in Jackson, Mississippi,
Oh, okay, okay.
and it's a well-known and well-respected liberal arts college.
Okay.
And so I decided to go there, and I can remember a conversation I had with Dr. Bergmark. He was my advisor my freshman year, and he was a Methodist minister, and he was on faculty at Millsaps. And we had a conversation about my path, and I told him, I said, I can't decide between the prospect of pursuing a law degree, law school, and something in business. And so he advised me to major in a discipline that would help prepare me for law school, like philosophy,
Yeah.
and then take a minor in business. That way, if I ultimately decided to pivot and go for an MBA, then I'd have maybe not all, but a lot of the prereq stuff out of the way, and it would be an easier transition. So he was a pretty wise gentleman, and so I followed his advice, and I'm glad I did. I actually worked in the Mississippi Secretary of State's office after graduation on the Hill there in Jackson, and it didn't take me too long to, I think, realize that politics and that kind of path, that really was not my
your
calling.
jam?
Yeah, that was not my calling. So I worked back in those days. You really were strongly encouraged to work in between your degrees to get experience, so that you could apply that experience when you came back.
Oh, yeah,
so
absolutely.
I worked for a number of years, and then was looking at graduate schools for the MBA. And my dad, he pitched me on the idea of coming to South. He and some colleagues in the college had developed a pretty robust consulting practice. Jeannie Mays, who's still on faculty, she was part of that group. And Dad's gift and strengths were more of the outward-facing, the rainmaker that was focused on client, development and that kind of thing. And so he convinced me that he really needed somebody on the back of the house to manage more of the mundane things. And he said, you can get your degree and you can do it at less cost than you could at some other schools I was looking at. And so I'm glad that I did that, because the relationships that I made, both with faculty but also with students, I still have those relationships, and it was a good decision. So that's how I ended up here, getting my MBA at South Alabama.
So you went right by something that I find fascinating. You were in the Caribbean?
Yes. So, yes. So,
Seems to be a major thing we want to get in.
Small stepping stone.
Exactly.
So a friend of mine and I, we were into sailing, and we really wanted to spend some time in the Caribbean. And so, as a high school graduation gift, I think we twisted our parents' arms to help finance a trip down to St. Thomas, and we had a blast. I mean, it was really a great time, for somebody that was 18, 19, whatever age I was. But we were in an establishment one evening, and the guy sitting next to us was the captain of this 92-foot sailing schooner, and he was bemoaning the fact that he didn't have enough crew, to take the crossing over to St. Bart's or wherever he was going, right? So we volunteered. Well, the problem was that my buddy had contracted cancer, and they had to amputate his arm when he was a senior. And so he was going back to Bethesda, Maryland, for regular follow-ups. And his mom said, "Absolutely not. You can't do that." But he was a wonderful friend. He encouraged me to do it. He said, "Don't feel guilty. Go and have a good time." And it's truly amazing that my parents said yes. Think about that.
Did you have any experience in sailing up to that point?
Shane, yes. Not a lot, but I'd done it at camp on a sunfish.
Okay.
And so my dad...
Exactly the same.
My dad had a wonderful idea. He was going to surprise me with the sunfish. And they had a condo down in Perita Key on the beach. And so he presented that sunfish to me, and I was ecstatic. But I don't think, we didn't really... I was taking that thing out in the Gulf. You could barely see land, and that, I look back on that, and that was crazy. But I didn't know any better. So I had a little experience, a Hobie Cats, that kind of thing, but nothing like a 92-foot sailing skirt. Yeah.
That would be quite a task. I'm sure that decision wasn't influenced at all by the establishment when you're in there and you made it.
Yes, it was, absolutely. But it was a great adventure. I learned a lot, and I met a lot of interesting people from all over the world. But I did realize, even in a setting, a paradise like that, and in a kind of a dream job, as a deckhand on a large sailboat, that ultimately I needed to go down a different path, and so that's what ultimately led me coming back kind of to Millsaps and going that path.
But you needed that gap year just to kind of realize that. Yeah,
I did. And I encouraged my oldest daughter, when she finished up at Mississippi State in elementary education. Well, no, she finished up in special education at Mississippi State. Her plan was to go on to graduate school. And she came, we talked, her mom, the three of us talked about maybe taking a gap year. She wasn't quite sure what she really wanted to do, and if she wanted a specialization in the master's program. And so we encouraged, her mom helped her figure out kind of some options, short list, and she ended up deciding on applying to American Airlines as a flight attendant.
Okay. Which was not on the list.
that was not on the radar at that time, Dionne. But she's always loved to travel and wanted to travel more, and so I didn't realize how rigorous that hiring process was. Yeah. But she made the cut, and Shane, that's been, I can't count the number of years, but it's been over 5-6 years now. So I don't think she'll go back to graduate school. So gap years help,
A gap decade coming up, I think.
Right.
Yeah,
that's
and
right.
you have 3 daughters, right?
Yeah, 2.
2 daughters.
Yeah.
3 daughters. I met the one on the beach down in
Yes,
Melton Island.
that's right.
Last week, or a few weeks ago.
That's right.
So then you eventually went back and got your PhD in Mississippi State. Was that directly after your MBA, or was that how you went into teaching, or you tried to go into teaching, you went back to get it?
Well, it was not directly after getting the MBA. Dr. Ed Harrison, after I graduated with the MBA, then I had kind of what you would call in the professional consulting industry the union card. I could then consult.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I was still doing the back of the house, business stuff for Dad and his team. But I then started to consult and travel and do consulting. And, if you know much about consulting, if you're trying to build a book of business, there's a lot of ups and downs, right? Mm-hmm. And, of course, I was newly married, and Ed Harrison convinced me that if I came and taught as an adjunct, I'd at least have one source of stable income, and he needed some help. The person that was going to teach the course, the Principles of Management course, I think had gotten ill, and he needed somebody at the last minute. And I said, okay, I was game for it. And of course, all the folks like Ed Harrison, Paul Petrie, Carl Moore, Jeannie Mays, they were all very helpful in getting me prepared and sharing their knowledge. So I felt pretty confident, and that experience was just incredible. I loved it, and Ed could see it. I mean,
Yeah.
And so he really kind of pushed my buttons to make me realize, I think, in some part of me, that maybe that was something that I should have on the dashboard to be thinking about. But it was ultimately my wife that really had me reflect, and so after probably a couple of 3 years, I can't remember exactly how many years of doing the consulting full time, which was, I mean, that was a lot of fun when it was just me and Emily. But when we had our first child, Meredith, you know, that became a little bit of a challenge because, you know, you're gone 3 or 4 or 5 days a week. And so I started to look around, and, you know, my dad's side of the family, as I shared earlier, is from Starkville. And so I looked at a few places, but that was a good fit for us. And it's a family-oriented kind of feel, environment, very supportive. And so I'm glad I made that decision to get my PhD. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I remember Dr. Smith, he was the chair of the management department when I interviewed to see if I could, you know, have an opportunity to be accepted. And, you know, Dr. Smith was like a old military guy, right?
Okay.
He'd been in the Marine Corps, and so he didn't mince words, and he didn't really follow the HR protocol. Mm-hmm. So one of the first questions he asked me, he said, Don, I see you're married with a young child. And he said, I just want to just share a few statistics with you. He said, now, people that are married that enter a PhD program, over 50% get divorced. So that was not a good bit of information. And then, you know, he proceeded to escalate that number if you had children and all of that. In other words, he was giving me a very realistic job preview so that I could either decide, bail out, or really, okay, I got to get myself in gear and do it, you know. So, but I had a good time up there. It was a lot, but it was a whole family effort, you know.
Yeah. Can't imagine.
Right.
Said this before.
Right.
So for last.
That's right. So you are over at the Melton Center. Talk to us about the Melton Center. What is it? What does it do?
So the Melton Center is our Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation in the Mitchell College of Business, and we serve a dual mission. We are here to serve the students on campus with ideation, business startup, creativity and innovation, and we do that through several programs. We've got our competitions that we host, and the pitch competition, which is that's a smaller requirement or ask of the students. It's a way that they can kind of get their feet wet pitching an idea or a concept. And we also have a venture competition, which is more like a friendly Shark Tank. So it's a longer presentation with a business plan component. Mm-hmm. And then we just started, Thomas Nelson had the idea of starting a business showcase where people, like a poster board session where people could present their ideas on a poster board, and the audience would mix and mingle through the different table spaces. And that way it's not as much pressure, but people can kind of get comfortable with presenting their thoughts and presenting their thoughts in a table format. So those are a couple of things. We also have a partnership with the Office of Research and Economic Development. It's not just our college, but Michael Chambers was very instrumental in getting the National Science Foundation's I-Core program. So we're an I-Core site, an innovation core site. And so Thomas Nelson and I are part of that teaching team. And it uses like lean launch concepts. So you do a lot of customer discovery. So we service the USA community in a lot of ways like that. But the other part of our mission is to serve the larger community along the central Gulf Coast. And we've got a few programs. We've got one that's the Build a Bridge Entrepreneurship High School program. And every year we'll host.
That's so cool. That is so cool to see the kids come in with their business ideas and pitch. That was so interesting.
It is, and they've got a lot of great ideas.
They do. And even if it's, just tiny right now, it's in their head now, and they'll just go out, hopefully, in the world and make that or something else happen.
And what's great at that age, you don't overthink things.
That's right.
They have an amazing idea, and they just go with it.
And sometimes that's what you need.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Don't overthink it.
Exactly.
Pursue it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we host that, and we have training. So we have a training workshop, and then we host the Spark pitch competition associated with that, and
which is what?
That's so the students that go through the entrepreneurship workshop and the training, then they have a period of time to work with their teachers back in their home schools on a business concept. Now, some of the students already have a business that's underway, and so they would take maybe what they've learned and start to think about growing or scaling in some way, right? And then we offer a month later this Spark pitch competition where they can come back and, compete for angel money. And this past year we had two tracks, the conceptual track and then the existing business track. And I think we awarded, I can't remember the total package, but we've been working with some of like Ashley Cawley took first place in the conceptual track, and we've been working with her to help her advance her business concept. And I think what she has, she's very smart, and she's got a really strong vision for what she wants this business concept to become. And so we have a lot of hope that she's going to make some good progress.
Right. We won't say what it is here, so I don't want to steal the idea.
No, absolutely
But it was
not.
Really well thought out. I thought you did a good job. And they get up and present in front of all these people and these adults that are judging them. It takes some nerve.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
It really does. I mean, I'm not sure that I could have done that when I was a junior in high school,
No.
No. So that's one of our community programs. Then we have two minority business programs that we do under one umbrella. One is a conceptual stage program for those that just have an idea, and then one is for existing businesses that want to accelerate.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and so we've got over 40 graduates of those two programs, and the impact has been really incredible. 64% of the students or participants that have gone through the programs, they have either started or grown their businesses in specific ways. We've got a list of categories or criteria. And so 64% success rate on that,
That's
on
incredible.
that growth
That
is, yeah.
So what do you consider a minority to qualify?
So it's based on the U.S. federal government's definition of minority, which is pretty inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Women, veterans, people of color. What else is there? It's a big umbrella.
Yes, it's a big umbrella, and we've had a lot of success with that. I think we will kick off we started this in 2017, and we'll kick off our next round of classes this fall.
Okay.
And Merchant and Marine Bank, and they have been somebody that decided, we've been talking with them a while, but they committed a pretty sizable investment in our programs this year, and we're looking forward to having them as a partner for the next 4 years to make sure, we've got a good runway now where we know we've got funding, and so.
Do you want to mention how much that investment just was?
Well, it was $200,000
Yes.
total for that 4-year run, which is amazing. They were
amazing.
very generous, and their culture, Merchant and Marine Bank's culture, I think really fits with the type of culture that we have, and their values. There's an alignment with the core values. They really are impressive as an organization. So those are some of the programs, Shane, that we operate in the Melton Center, and we're in the prospect. the new dean, Michael Capella's got some really great ideas on tweaking the competition component that we do to broaden our, the opportunities, so not just for students, but including any connection that you might have to South, whether it's faculty, staff, alumni, parents of students, and also trying to increase funding so that we can have a greater economic impact.
Even the previous competition that was just held, the venture pitch competition, I was lucky enough to sit in on all the actual presentations, and I mean the quality was outstanding. I was not expecting that. I suppose having an Irish perspective, we're not as, I suppose, exuberant in presenting stuff. So it was funny to watch. Luke, in particular, the first presentation, was like, okay, he's setting the pace. But it was the quality presentations, the ideas, the actual work and details gone into it was incredible. And like you can see, like a competition like this really fosters the entrepreneurial spirit. Like I think it was Luke's his third year, was it?
It was definitely his second year, but he's worked with Thomas Nutway and with me for a number of years. And I tell you what, that young man, that's the definition of an entrepreneur.
Yes.
He has got a lot of ideas. He's very passionate, and he works extremely hard. And if you remember, I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what the growth numbers were, but that concept he's been working on for a few years. And to see that level of growth within that business.
I think he's doubling every year. That's his goal. And he's no signs of slowing down.
No.
Whatsoever.
No, and I you always want, there's a debate in entrepreneurship. Do you bet on the entrepreneur or do you bet on the idea? And I think you got to have an idea that kind of meets the minimum bar, but I really think it's about the entrepreneur. I think
they'll make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do they have that is going to just make them stand out and persevere through all the adversity they're going to face? If they've got that passion, that entrepreneurial mindset, they'll get it done.
Yeah, actually, a little kind of side note. I'm not sure if you remember Fire Festival. That was supposed to happen, I think, maybe 2-3 years ago. It was this festival. Can't remember the guy's name. He sold the whole thing out. Huge acts, promised everything. It was in the desert, and
in the United States.
In the United States, and then I think it was just some desert, and anyway, it all fell through. But the people still went, and there was no water for them. Like there was no proper accommodation.
I do remember that, Shane.
They bet on the entrepreneur on that one.
And I listened to a podcast where he was talking, and he's just out of prison. He did
Wow.
7 years, like properly in prison. At one stage, he started doing his own podcast using his monthly minutes, and they caught him. They put him in solitary confinement for 3 months. But this guy, I mean, like he could sell you anything. I could tell, and like he had so much charm. You hated to like him during the podcast, and then he finishes with a small note that he's doing Fire Festival too.
He's doing scam all over again.
He can. And the thing is, he's such a good entrepreneur. I feel he can do it.
Right.
He sold me alone. So it just shows.
You're going? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like the idea, it failed once. He's no issue. He's a good entrepreneur. He'll do it again, and he'll succeed.
You got to have that fire.
You absolutely do.
Well, I think there's a research study, or maybe it's more anecdotal, but entrepreneurs on average fail 3 times before they, are successful. Notwithstanding the illegal nature of maybe what he was doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, for sure.
So how did they pick you to be the head of entrepreneurship here at Mitchell College of Business? Is it because you have a passion for entrepreneurism, and how'd that happen?
Well, I think it was happenstance, really. I was chair of the management department at the time, and we were, the nation, the world's coming out of the great financial recession, and at a certain point when we were coming out of that, our ability as a university to hire some lines that had been frozen when the economy was not strong. A lot of those lines opened up, and so we could go out and recruit for needed resources that we had, and so we really recruited a good group of professors in management and some in marketing, and those were the areas that I was primarily involved in. But the one position that we couldn't fill was the executive director of the Melton Center. Mark Weaver, who was the founding executive director, he had done an incredible job of laying the foundation and really building the center up from scratch. I mean, he put together the curriculum. He was recruiting students. They developed a partnership with the university, so they had some kind of incubation space over in the research park. And when he retired, we really didn't have anybody to lead the center. And so we went to market twice, and so ultimately the dean at the time, Bob Wood, asked me if I would step into that role, and he asked me to kind of stabilize and grow it. That was kind of the task. And Thomas Nelson was hired during that period. So Thomas became the director, like over all of the competitions and the internal stuff. And then I became more of the outward-facing
outreach.
Yeah, outreach guy. And it's been a good partnership because, Thomas is a serial entrepreneur, and he's been academically trained in entrepreneurship at the undergraduate, graduate, and PhD levels. In fact, you do reference calls on folks that you are looking to hire, right? And so his major professor at Louisville said that bar none, Thomas was his best, one of his top doctoral students. And so that was very impressive. And I don't think we could have done collectively as a team, and I'm including Rachel Backlund and our grad students and undergrads that we've had working with us, as well as our board of advisors. We couldn't have done it without all of those pieces. So Thomas was needed, Rachel Backlund was necessary, our student support, our board has been incredible. And so really using a collaborative model, I think we've been able to achieve some milestones that maybe a little earlier than we thought we could have.
You really value people. That's a common thread we're getting among a lot of the interviewees. I suppose then your research kind of delves into personal characteristics, environmental characteristics, such as self-efficacy, humility, leadership style. Do you think that kind of came from your background in philosophy and you combined that with your MBA, that you had a much broader view when it came to how personalities and personal characteristics impact an organization?
Yeah, Shane, I do. I mean, looking back on it, I hadn't thought about it maybe until you asked that question specifically, but I remember being interested in leadership at an early age, and then it was in the MBA program that I actually did a kind of a paper on leadership, looking at successful models of leadership, and there's a big debate that is ongoing about whether leaders are born or made, and you could make the same argument for entrepreneurs, right? And so I've always been interested in that question, and when I was in college and graduate school, I had what I thought was a very definite answer to that question. But it's funny how that answer in my mind has evolved over time, especially after having children and seeing how distinctly different my two girls' personalities are, even though there's a lot of similarities, right?
Yeah.
So I think answers for me now is obviously it's a little bit of both. It's about the person and the traits and characteristics they bring to the table, what they're born with, and then their life experiences, that they go through that kind of help to hone those traits, knowledge, skills, etc., right? So yes, that's one area of interest. In fact, I've got two doctoral students that are looking at entrepreneurial mindset is one of the main constructs that both of them are looking at. It's a different model for each study, for each dissertation, but entrepreneurial mindset is a personal trait or characteristic of entrepreneurs. And it's been defined differently by different researchers, but to give you a high-level definition, it is a way of looking at the world, right, with an entrepreneurial lens. And at the Melton Center, we don't necessarily I mean, obviously one of our goals is to help students start businesses, as you saw with the venture presentations. But when we recruit, it's more about the mindset, the entrepreneurial mindset that can be developed. So it's a malleable trait. It's not like IQ that's not so malleable, right? You can develop an entrepreneurial mindset through your experiences and your training and your education. And we really believe in the center that entrepreneurial mindset that someone has, that can be a positive strength to leverage regardless of whether you want to start your own business, you want to work for an entrepreneur that's in a mid-stage venture, or maybe you want to go the corporate route or maybe even the nonprofit route. Because that skill set that's associated with that entrepreneurial mindset, creativity, innovativeness, that type of decision making can help you along any of those paths.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do believe that a big part of the equation of entrepreneurial success has to do with the individual entrepreneur.
Absolutely. There's like three things I always kind of think about when I think of an entrepreneur. Sometimes they're realists, they know what's going to happen in the world. They're always optimistic. You don't see a pessimistic entrepreneur. They're not going to, how can they see it making it? Or how can the world see it, the product going to make it or the service going to make it if they can't? Yeah. And also delusion. There's definitely elements of that all everywhere. Like my father's an entrepreneur actually as well. So eldest of 8 kids on a farm, grew up, but it just seemed like you kind of know as soon as you talk to him that this guy, he's not going to work for somebody else. He's going to be an entrepreneur. He's going to get it. It's just that personality. Those guys can always make it. They find a way to make it work. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So you grew up on a farm in Ireland?
Luckily enough, no, actually.
No,
he did. But he still is in farming. But they're not kind of farms you want to live on, pig farms. So it wouldn't be ideal. Not the best smell.
Not the best smell.
Not the best smell. But he kind of expanded. Then he started off with nothing, poor farmer. Worked on one of the farms, built it up. Eventually took it over from the old owner, got another whatever, and then got into consultancy, kind of construction, kind of all that sort of stuff. So he's always looking for what's next. Like I don't think he'll ever retire, and I don't think he knows how to not work.
Well, that's good. I read something just recently that was talking about you don't really want to retire for good, right? Mm-hmm. Because it keeps your mental going. Your mind going. It keeps you physically engaged and active. So kudos to your dad, right?
Yeah. Like I don't think he will ever retire.
Right.
I don't know if he loves it, but he does it that sort of way. He just, yeah.
He loves the doing it part.
I think it is, yeah.
Well, so Shane, some of the research in entrepreneurship suggests that one of the main influencing factors whether a person becomes an entrepreneur is kind of their family experience. So a lot of entrepreneurs come from families that have entrepreneurs, right? So are you thinking about an entrepreneurial life in your future based on...
Hopefully podcaster.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes I do think about that. I'm not too pushed for getting that cozy 9 to 5. I did one last year. It was all right, but it's too mundane. So I think I do really want to get into something where I can actually have control. The more work you put in, the more it's growing. I don't want to give my life to just being another cog in the wheel.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So yes.
I think it's hopefully in my future. Yeah.
Well, you need to think about pitching something next year.
I did. I talked to Nelson about that, and it's already in the works.
That's awesome. Wonderful to hear.
Oh yeah, and your recent publication, you kind of recently released a publication on supervisory management, the art of empowering and developing people. Could you give us some keynotes from that, or some kind of key points that you haven't already touched on? Because you probably touched on a few points in that last statement.
So I think earlier in my career, so that was a book that my dad and Paul Petrie and Dr. Megginson had, and my dad and Dr. Megginson have passed away, but Dad and Paul Petrie wanted to transition that book.
Who's also a former dean, right?
Paul actually was not a former dean, but he was the director of the Business Resource Center.
Okay, yeah.
For the college, which he was the outreach for professional development. and consulting through the college.
Okay.
And so when they were running all of the supervisory management programs, Paul was directly involved with all of that. Okay. And so that book came out of their early experiences, and then they brought me on probably sometime in the, I would say, early 90s when I started to pursue my graduate work. And I was really just going to start out helping in an editing role. And then as I started to think about a PhD, I think it was then that they decided, okay, well, let's have a transition plan, a succession plan, if you will, so that when they retired, they wanted to have already brought me on as an author. And so in that last edition, or the edition before the last one, I worked with Paul on that, and that was really a great experience to work with a mentor like him. And then the last edition of the book currently, I had on my own, and that was a pretty big endeavor. But some of the key takeaways from that book, I think, for entrepreneurs or even non-entrepreneurs, I'll mention two concepts that I think everybody struggles with. One is time management. And so there's a whole section on time management and personal development. And that's kind of a theme. The personal development's a theme throughout the book. And then there's a chapter on delegation and empowerment. And I think for anybody that aspires to manage or is managing, that may be one of the most challenging concepts in an early career, right? Learning how to delegate effectively, how to coach your team so that you can empower them, because you can really increase your performance productivity and your strength of power collectively as a unit if you're able to delegate effectively and learn how to empower. And so that's a whole separate chapter, but it's also a theme within the book, especially when it comes to leadership and motivation, right? And a personal leadership theory in the leadership chapter that I really believe has a lot of validity is authentic leadership. In my experiences working with leaders or even managing others, people know when you're being authentic, and they know when you're not. Mm-hmm. And so as a leader, if you want the respect and the trust of the followers that you're working with and through to accomplish big things, you've got to be authentic with people. And so that's one of the key takeaways that, I don't know if I always live up to that high standard, but I think it's something that we should strive to anyway.
100%. I was ringing such a bell. So I had a previous role. I had two managers. They're both same age. They started in the company together, and one was direct manager and one was the line manager. Yeah. And one, say, delegation, she wouldn't give you every task because she wasn't trusting enough that people could do it as good as her in her eyes. And then you kind of wouldn't feel empowered, and it wasn't good. And then the other manager, she gives it to you. She gives you the responsibility. She lets you know she's giving you the responsibility, and she was the most straight person I've ever met. Mm-hmm. If you're doing a good job, she tells you. If you're not, she'll tell you straight away. Whereas the other one is smiling all the way and kind of saying, "No, yeah, this is okay," and then editing in the background. And you could see, it was so clear as day which was the more effective manager, who got the better results, and who had a better relationship with their employees. I'm not saying that the other manager was terrible, but it was like looking at a book, like reading an example. It was so clear and perfect of the example you kind of gave.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a story that just resonates. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Through time.
Yes, through time.
We've all had those bosses.
Yeah.
So before we end this, I wanted you to talk a little bit about the dean's plans for entrepreneurial degrees. What do you think is on the horizon for Mitchell College of Business?
So based on the dean's vision and focus in the early stages of being with us, he's got a pretty clear priority, and one of the priorities is entrepreneurship, and so I think he's looking at it from a very strategic standpoint. Currently, entrepreneurship is a concentration, and he would like to convert or change that from a concentration to a major. And the major would be for undergraduate students, and as I understand it, he would like to also change when students can declare for a major. So instead of declaring later in their academic tenure, he'd like for them to be able to declare as early as after their freshman year.
Okay, yeah.
So that gives us, whether it's entrepreneurship or another major, it gives the professors in those content areas more time to work and coach and mentor the students, right? And we're excited about that. We're going to be putting together the necessary paperwork to get approval to transition from a concentration to a major for the fall of 2025. And that new format for the competitions, Launch USA, that I mentioned, I'm not sure I called it Launch USA, but that's kind of in line with the change from concentration to major. And then at the graduate level, I don't know if this is as high a priority as the undergraduate, but he's looking at current ways to offer areas for MBA students or graduate students to kind of do a deeper dive into certain areas that they're interested in. And I think entrepreneurship is one area, because we've got the resources already in the Melton Center so that we could do that. But I think at the PhD level, it's a clear competitive advantage, because Michael Capella has shared the statistics, and I may not get them exactly right, but let's assume that there are, say, 200 undergraduate schools that offer a major in entrepreneurship. There are 12 or less that offer that at the PhD level. So whereas management and marketing and more of those general PhDs, those are more plentiful, right? More of those are minted each year. There are fewer entrepreneurship PhDs. And so there's the demand-supply relationship would suggest that if we
There's
develop...
opportunity there for us,
opportunity. And think about the impact that a graduate from our program would have in other institutions. So you then develop out a really nice network of MCOB PhD grads in this area.
Bring them back.
Yeah. And you need entrepreneur to create jobs for those management and accounting people. It's such a fundamental part. It's so good to see Dr. Cabela so interested. I remember when we did our podcast, we actually asked him how did he like Mobile, and straight away he talked about the infrastructure coming in, the runway, the airport, the bridge coming in, that are dredging the bay. Like, we meant, did you like the area? Straight away, it was his entrepreneurial business mindset. And he's just so focused on that, on expanding the future, the potential. So it's great to see, he's really making a change like that in the courses.
Yes, I think, and I think, I'm on board with that vision. And he's got some other ideas that he has presented to different stakeholders since January. And the other thoughts that are outside of our area, I like those as well. Yeah. I think he's really got the best interests of the college and the university at heart. And I think he's helping us to differentiate and kind of following President Bonner's, motto of us being the flagship of the Gulf Coast. If you're going to do that at the university level, then at the college level, you got to differentiate and be a flagship in some areas.
That's right.
So I think his vision's a strong one.
Good.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
this has been very informative.
Extremely, yeah.
Well, thank you both. I'm humbled and very thankful that you asked me to be on this.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Don. That was another, just every time we're it's like being in the presentations again. Every time, everyone brings so much to the table, and it's just great to hear.
This is the point of this. so that students and everyone can hear about you, as instead of you in front of the class or you in title. We want to know more about you and how you see things. Yeah.
Well, Dionne, I'm going to turn the table on you a little bit.
Oh, no.
Because this is definitely an entrepreneurial venture, the podcast.
This podcast studio.
Shane was describing how this all came to be.
Right.
So y'all are both entrepreneurially minded.
That's right.
I can guarantee she didn't overthink it.
Right.
She bought the box and she knew it was going to happen.
That's right. And guess what? We're doing a podcast.
Exactly.
And here we are doing a podcast.
Exactly. Number 9. Yeah.
Number 9. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Don. And that wraps up the number 9 by the Numbers podcast, hosted by me, Shane.
And me, Dionne.
And that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to By the Numbers, brought to you by the Mitchell College of Business. Stay tuned. There'll be a new episode coming soon.